This Saturday, the 20th of September, AEW will present their annual All Out pay-per-view from the Scotiabank Arena in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Now, while the pay-per-view isn't going exactly head-to-head with WWE's WrestlePalooza PLE, it is taking place on the same day. With AEW All Out, traditionally one of AEW's biggest shows of the year, could AEW, Tony Khan, and the rest of his creative team have several major debuts up his sleeve? In this countdown video, we're going to let you know 5 names that could be set to make a major debut in All Elite Wrestling at All Out. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of stories to get into in the world of professional wrestling. And as I mentioned, this Saturday, September 20th, 2025, it is AEW All Out. It's going to be taking place not in Chicago. It usually takes place in Chicago. This time it's going to be taking place in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It's going to be taking place at the Scotiabank Arena. And as I said, there's been a lot of conversation, hasn't there, about AEW versus WWE this weekend. Initially, they were going to be going head-to-head with WWE WrestlePalooza and AEW All Out. Then a change to the time was made by All Elite Wrestling. Now the show is beginning at 3 p.m. Eastern, meaning they're not going exactly head-to-head, but they are still taking place on the same day. And given the fact that AEW All Out is one of AEW's biggest events of the year, of course, it's been one of their big 5 pay-per-views that's been going on since 2019. So because of that, are we going to see several high-profile debuts? Has Tony Khan got some surprises up his sleeve in the form of several stars becoming All Elite this Saturday? We're going to let you know 5 names that could be set to become All Elite and make their debut at the Scotiabank Arena. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe. Let's begin with Karrion Kross. This is a really interesting one with Karrion Kross, isn't it? Because don't you feel like the whole Karrion Kross, isn't he released by WWE? It's kind of faded, hasn't it? It's kind of faded away. There had been all this, suggestions. This is a work. Karrion Kross, it's an elaborate situation whereby, his contract has expired, but he's actually signed a new one. And despite Karrion Kross and Scarlett telling people, no, we are really gone from WWE. We're not working, everyone. People have kind of moved on. And maybe it is a situation where legitimately he is gone from WWE. Now, because of the circumstances of his departure, it did lead and sort of smell and look like it didn't pass the smell test, did it, that this wasn't an elaborate storyline. I mean, he was wrestling on SummerSlam. He was wrestling at PLEs when his contract had just days left on it. He wrestled Sami Zayn at Night of Champions. He wrestled Sami Zayn at SummerSlam. And he's even said that there were creative plans seemingly in place for him after SummerSlam, but of course, because he didn't stick around, they didn't end up happening. The SummerSlam match ended up being Karrion Kross's final appearance in WWE, and they left on August 10th after their contract expired and were not renewed. Now, he did say that he was given 24 hours to sign a new contract offer, which didn't include Scarlett re-signing along with him. And he sort of said, well, I want to find out more, want to find out how you come to that decision, etc., etc. And ultimately, he didn't sign it. They rescinded the offer. That's why he's gone from the company. Now, since then, he has made a few appearances on the indies, which again has led to people going, oh, maybe this actually isn't a thing. Maybe that's part of it as well, which I suppose it's difficult because you look at the places that he has appeared. You could make an argument to state that is this a situation whereby it's just he's made appearances for GCW. He made his return to GCW in August, a few weeks after his WWE departure at GCW Homecoming. As Killer Kross, he and Scarlett made their first post-WWE appearance. They attacked Matt Cardona, but again, GCW has been affiliated with WWE. Of course, they've had WWE ID matches and tournaments to host the WWE ID champion. So it's led to people still going, well, that's a kind of a WWE affiliate, so we're not really sure how real it is. But everyone has said, if Karrion Kross and Scarlett legitimately are gone from WWE, the way to confirm that it's not a storyline, it's not a work, is by showing up in AEW. Now, when Karrion Kross was first released by WWE back in 2021, he did have talks with AEW at the time. It wasn't about a long-term run or anything like that. Reportedly, it was talks about a one-off. They couldn't come to terms. It didn't happen. So they have spoken in the past. There is discussion about could Karrion Kross and Scarlett even come into AEW because there might be issues with people that work there stemming from their time in Impact/TNA Wrestling and his sort of acrimonious departure from that company back then before he signed with WWE in 2020. So you do feel like there is possible baggage there, but there have been people that have come over to AEW and signed with the company when it was thought that maybe they wouldn't because of backstage issue and backstage drama. Look at MVP. For the longest time, people said, well, MVP, he's not going to go to AEW because he's got heat with Chris Jericho. MVP now is a part of the Hurt Syndicate weekly on AEW television. So just because of stuff that's happened in the past, it doesn't, I guess, make it not happen. It just makes it maybe a bit more unlikely. But if Karrion Kross really wanted to get people talking about himself, he would show up in AEW. Now, maybe, as Kross alluded to in interviews with the likes of Ariel Helwani, maybe people like AEW aren't reaching out to him because they assume he's under contract and they don't want to be accused of contract tampering, and this could be a whole elaborate ruse by WWE. One thing's for certain, if Kross shows up in AEW, that's a sign that his departure from WWE is legitimate and not an elaborate work. We'll have to wait and see, won't we? We'll have to wait and see. But if AEW really wanted to make a splash on a day that they're having a pay-per-view the same day as WWE's first PLE on ESPN with WrestlePalooza, having someone like Karrion Kross, who a lot of people are still scratching their heads on why he left WWE, that would get a lot of people's attention, wouldn't it? So maybe, just maybe, Karrion Kross could become All Elite. Now, before we move on to the next name on this list, a reminder, this video is brought to you in collaboration with all of our affiliates. You can see right there, the likes of NordVPN and others. All of the details are in the video description. They'll be pinned in the comment section as well. You can get yourself some great products. You can save yourself some money, and you can also support the channel in the process. And when it comes to NordVPN, this weekend is the time to get a VPN. If you're someone in the United States and you're concerned about WWE main roster PLEs moving from Peacock to ESPN and how much it's going to cost you, you can get all of your WWE content on Netflix as part of your Netflix subscription. All you've got to do is get a VPN. You can use our link right there, and you can change your location to an international territory where WWE content is exclusively on Netflix, and then you can watch Raw, SmackDown, NXT, main roster PLEs, NXT PLEs. You can even watch Saturday Night's main events for free on YouTube. All you got to do is get a VPN. And also, when it comes to AEW events, we get them cheaper over here when it comes to an AEW Plus subscription on Triller TV. So hey, maybe now's the time to do it. So be sure to get yourself a NordVPN. Your support is really appreciated. Let's move on and talk about Shayna Baszler. There's been so much talk recently, hasn't there, about Marina Shafir and obviously her role in the Death Riders. Very prominently featured in the Death Riders and has really been elevated with what she's been doing with that group. Now, there's been talk, hasn't there, recently of possibly an integration of AEW Women's Tag Team Championships. It's something that Tony Khan, the AEW president and CEO, has spoken about possibly wanting to do. And maybe we've seen the Death Riders recruiting new members as well recently. Daniel Garcia recently becoming a member, turning heel in the process. Who's to say that the Death Riders, despite losing the AEW World Championship at AEW All In Texas, they're still not done just yet. The faction doesn't look like it's going to be disbanding anytime soon. In fact, maybe they're going to be recruiting more members. Maybe they're going to be recruiting more members to the group, and Shayna Baszler could be another badass woman that they introduce to it. Maybe they have two female enforcers. Marina Shafir's not enough. They can get someone else in there. And of course, there's the connection when it comes to the Four Horsewomen. Maybe that even paves the way for Ronda Rousey to come in. Who knows when it comes to that. Now, there had been a little bit of confusion about Shayna Baszler and just in general her pro wrestling future. Now, she is free from WWE at this point. On May 2nd, WWE informed Shayna Baszler that her contract was going to expire on July 31st, and they weren't going to be renewing her contract, which ended her 8-year tenure with the company, and it disbanded the faction she was in at the time, Pure Fusion Collective. Now, despite having been released under a 90-day non-compete clause, Baszler was reported to be listed as a producer on the July 9th episode of NXT. She produced a match alongside Christopher Girard. She later explained on an interview with Ariel Helwani that it was just because she was still under contract and she was still hanging out at the WWE PC, and it was something that she wanted to take a look at and see if she wanted to do. She did, though, say that moving and sticking with WWE in a producer role would effectively end her in-ring career, and that was something she was weighing up about whether she wanted to do it or not. She still felt that she had time, gas left in the tank. She's 45 years old, but in pro wrestling terms, that's nothing. Some of WWE's biggest stars at the moment are 45 years old. Some of AEW's biggest stars are in their 40s or 50s, right? Why just when it comes to a woman, just because she's in her mid-40s, does that mean her in-ring career is over? So it's up to Shayna Baszler with what she wants to do, but she certainly would have value to bring AEW, and I guess it's just what she wants to do. I guess it's whether she wants to wind down as an in-ring talent, stick with WWE because it's what she knows, and in the long term that might be better for her to transition into a producer role, or does she want to work, have a bit more in-ring time before she can, she's forced to hang it up kind of thing, or she gets too old to do it, and then transition into a producer role. So there's lots of different things she'd want to think about, but you do feel like there would be a spot for her in AEW, particularly with the Death Riders, or maybe she comes in and feuds with Marina Shafir, right? Maybe she helps put over Marina Shafir and the Death Riders, or maybe she's just involved in the AEW Women's Division in general. But Shayna Baszler in AEW, I certainly think it's a possibility. Now let's talk about another female talent coming in to All Elite Wrestling, Dakota Kai. I feel like every time we bring up talent that could be coming in to All Elite Wrestling, Dakota Kai's name continues to be linked. Why? Because when she left WWE the first time, she was linked and actually had talks with AEW. That was a genuine situation at the time. Now, whether or not, again, this is going to be, whether she comes back to professional wrestling, we don't know. As I mentioned, in April of 2022, Kai was released from a WWE contract. She was with the company for 7 years, and she actually told the company at the time she wasn't planning on renewing her contract. It was at a time where a lot of people were leaving WWE and jumping to AEW because of creative frustrations, Vince McMahon, etc., etc. Once Paul Triple H Levesque took over creative control, she was very quickly brought back in July of the same year, and she formed Damage Control with Bayley and Io Sky, and she appeared at SummerSlam. But during that time, between the end of April and the end of July in 2022, she did hold talks with AEW, and there was a thought that she was going to come in. Of course, it didn't happen. She ended up going back to WWE. But in May of this year, she was once again released from her WWE contract, ended her second tenure of 3 years with the company. She did have quite a few injuries during her time just overall with WWE across those two runs. So there was a bit of a feeling of maybe she is a bit injury prone or what have you, but she's still got a lot to give. She's 37 years old. She's absolutely in her prime right now, and she's recently spoken about her pro wrestling future, saying that, she's maybe started to miss pro wrestling, and she's opened up and sort of said, well, I have had some time off to think about what I want to do next, and thinking about it, she said, quote, this was on a Twitch stream, quote, "I miss wrestling, you guys. We're going to get back into it. It's just one of those things where it has been nice to have a little bit of a break. I have been doing it for a long time, longer than the last 7 years that I was in WWE. You know what I mean? It's nice to take a step back for a while, but I really do miss it." So as for what's next for her, a lot of people do think that she could end up in AEW. That seems like the most likely landing spot. It doesn't necessarily mean it's impossible to go to TNA Wrestling, but because of their affiliation, it feels like everything has to be kind of co-signed. Of course, there have been people that have been released by WWE that end up in TNA. Ash by Influence, Jakara Jackson, just to name a few, Elijah. So it's not impossible. She could end up in TNA, and they have a fantastic knockouts division. But because there were talks in the past, and you feel like Dakota Kai would be kind of a perfect fit for the AEW Women's Division, and a perfect fit to challenge someone like Mercedes Moné for the TBS Championship, you feel like. So Dakota Kai, who knows? She could make her debut for AEW at All Out. What about Karl Fredericks? This is a really interesting one. The former Eddie Thorpe. Because when he departed WWE, a lot of people were quite surprised by that, because he was being featured quite heavily on WWE television. He had been with New Japan Pro Wrestling for several years, and when he actually signed with WWE, there was a feeling of, right, they're going to build him up, and he's going to be, pushed quite hard in NXT, and he'll get onto the main roster fairly quickly. But that didn't really end up happening. As I said, he was featured quite a lot towards the end of his tenure with WWE. He was featured going after NXT championships. There was this big storyline where he was trying to qualify for the Iron Survivor Challenge. He won a Fatal 4-Way last chance match to qualify for the Iron Survivor match at NXT Deadline. Then he was later found attacked backstage. He was ruled out. 2 days after Deadline, he confronted NXT champion Trick Williams, demanded a title shot, which Williams agreed. Upon signing the title match contract, he turned heel. He revealed to Ava that he staged his own attack to ease his way into the NXT championship match. The next week, when the title match happened, there was a double pinfall. He then challenged for the NXT Championship a bunch of different times, and he continued to feud with Trick Williams. So he's involved in an NXT Championship feud, and more often than not, if you're feuding for the title, you're going to get called up to the main roster eventually. Now, their feud culminated in a strap match at NXT Vengeance Day in February, where Thorpe actually won his first NXT PLE appearance. On the March 18th episode of NXT, Williams defeated Thorpe in an NXT Underground match to end their feud, but he's involved with the NXT champion, getting victories over the former NXT champion. And then, a couple of months later, on May 2nd, Thorpe was released from WWE, ending his 2-year tenure with the company. Now, he's come out since then and sort of suggested that he requested his release. He wasn't happy in WWE. He wasn't feeling creatively fulfilled, and that's what it was. He quickly, after his departure, had said, again, a pretty strong statement, actually. On Sunday, after his release, he responded to a comment on social media praising Fredericks for being outspoken on various issues. He said, quote, "I asked for my release from WWE so I could do something effing meaningful with my life." Now, he then said in a follow-up response to another poster, "I set the goal to work there. I spent a decade working for it. I got it. And in my experience, I came to the conclusion I didn't want to do it." So he certainly wasn't happy with his time in WWE and didn't feel like it was what he thought it was going to be. But they did have plans for him and they were featuring him. So who's to say that maybe he doesn't decide to find a home in AEW? He wouldn't be the first person who was in WWE, they didn't like it or it didn't work out for them. Timeless Toni Storm's a great example of someone that was in WWE, didn't like it, requested their release, and now she says she's an AEW lifer and she's very happy and is one of the biggest stars they've got in the company. So Karl Fredericks could be someone that becomes All Elite very, very soon. And finally, this isn't technically a debut, it's more of a return, but what about Andrade Out Idolo? A surprise name on this list, isn't it, Andrade? Now, as I said, it's not a debut, it's a return, and he's probably going to be in the return video. But Andrade, everyone was shocked by his departure from WWE over the weekend. At the time recording this video, news came out that Andrade had left WWE. He was fired, released. There were creative issues. There was a wellness policy violation. There were changed creative plans because he was teaming with Rey Fenix to go after the WWE Championship. They teamed together at SummerSlam in that six-pack TLC match. They were reportedly scheduled for Clash in Paris to possibly challenge for the WWE Tag Team titles against the Wyatt Six, but it didn't end up happening, and there were trips to South America where WWE couldn't contact him for several weeks. Now, he has since posted thanking WWE for his tenure. Of course, he was in AEW prior to his return to WWE, and a large amount of that tenure, people thought that really he was just trying to get back to WWE, particularly once Triple H had got creative control of the company. But he found out, I guess, the grass isn't always greener and wasn't for him, and decided he wanted to leave World Wrestling Entertainment, or, maybe he was forcing his way out. Maybe he didn't want to leave. Time will only tell when it comes to that. Now, even though there was a feeling that maybe it didn't end on great terms at AEW, Tony Khan actually was quite glowing in his praise of him. There was a feeling that Andrade was going to stay at one point. AEW wanted him to stay. They offered him a new contract. They thought he was going to sign it. Then, sort of quite late on, he informed them that he wasn't going to stay in AEW and he was going to go back to WWE. His final match was against, ironically enough, Miro, who is now back in WWE as Rusev at AEW World's End in 2023. And then that would be Andrade's last appearance on AEW programming, as his contract would expire at the end of the year, which was confirmed by Tony Khan in the post-show media scrum. But again, he was quite glowing in his praise of him. Andrade, when he left AEW, wrote a really long statement on his notes app, much longer than he has this time around. So, as Sean Ross Sapp recently said, no bridge, I guess, is truly burned in All Elite Wrestling. So, it's not impossible that Andrade could come back. Now, we don't know the details of if he's got a non-compete or anything like that. Logic would suggest if he was released by WWE and he didn't have an 18-month long contract, probably longer, you would think minimum 3 years, maybe even 5 years, then he would be serving out his 90-day non-compete non-compete clause, but you never know. Sometimes talent, if they let go for disciplinary reasons, they don't have to sit one out. CM Punk was fired with cause from AEW, and he ended up back in WWE fairly quickly because he didn't actually have a non-compete clause, as he confirmed. But you think standard WWE contracts usually have a non-compete, but again, you never know with this situation. So maybe WWE, because of just the situation, decided to fire him and said, you don't have to serve your non-compete. Maybe that was part of it. And maybe because of that, AEW looked to make a statement. There would be people saying that's not the right move to bring him back because he did have trouble in AEW and backstage altercations. He was sent home after a fight in Sammy Guevara backstage. There's a lot of baggage there. But maybe he decided that, again, the grass wasn't greener and he wants to come back to All Elite Wrestling. We'll have to wait and see. But there you go, guys. There are 5 possible major debuts at All Out this weekend. What do you think of the list? Which ones are likely, unlikely? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe. There's going to be a ton of countdown videos coming up for both All Out and WrestlePalooza as the week goes on. So be sure to click the notification bell. You'll be notified when a new video is uploaded. And remember, we will be live for not only AEW All Out, but also WWE WrestlePalooza on Saturday. It's going to be a very, very busy Saturday. First, we have AEW All Out. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, so I'll be live about 15 minutes before the show goes on the air. The pay-per-view goes on the air. Then we'll have WWE WrestlePalooza. Now, there could be a situation where they overlap. If they do, we're going to have 2 separate streams that are going to be running at the same time. One AEW All Out stream and then a WWE WrestlePalooza stream there. Once All Out finishes, we'll move everything over to the WrestlePalooza stream. We will have post shows for both, even if we have to do them a little bit after they go off the air. So, for instance, it might be a situation where All Out just goes straight into WrestlePalooza. We then do a WrestlePalooza post show, and then we don't do an All Out post show. We kind of did that with All in Texas that weekend. So we're going to have lots of live streams and a lot of content this week. It's going to be a busy one, but it's going to be an enjoyable one. So be sure to join us. Appreciate everyone for tuning in, as always, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.